The wind tuned the cables of the Granite Point Bridge, a low C note Warren Hale felt in his back teeth. He knew that note. At 1:02 a.m., it held steady. A quiet night. The control cabin smelled of old coffee, ozone, and grease. Warren stood at the console, a tall man, 68, worn lean. His hands rested on the panel, large, knuckles squared from decades of turning valves. A faded scar curved over his right hand. His final shift. At 0600, automation would take over. He logged the hour. 0100, all systems nominal. His retirement was a 32-foot trawler named Dawn Treader, tied at South Haven Marina. He'd checked her systems over the weekend. His pension was the fuel. He pictured her diesel turning over at dawn, a clean rumble he'd earned. At 1:04 a.m., the radio crackled. Granite Point Control, Coastal Trader, request scheduled eastbound lift for 01:05. Warren keyed the mic. Confirmed, standby. He initiated the sequence. Warning lights strobed, safety gates clanged shut. The console was green. At 1:05, he pressed the master lift switch. The bridge awoke. A deep groan vibrated up through the cabin floor. The road split, tilting skyward. At the 3-second mark, Warren felt it through his boots. A hitch, a sharp, lateral shudder. Wrong. His eyes snapped to the vibration display. The needle quivered, but stayed green. The system log scrolled. Lift parameters nominal. No faults detected. The bridge completed its ascent. Below, the Coastal Trader began its passage. Warren's gaze stayed on the gauges, every light green. The anomaly existed only in the memory of his bones. He pulled the logbook back. He wrote, 0105, lift completed, all readings nominal. On the next line, note, perceived anomalous lateral vibration at T plus 3 seconds, unconfirmed by primary sensors. He sat still. If he flagged this, the handover would freeze. His pension would be placed under review. The marina would give his paid slip to someone else by the end of the week. The Dawn Treader would sit idle, her systems cooling, while he sat in meetings. Somewhere below the deck, a low vibration passed through the hull. Brief, uneven, gone almost as soon as it arrived. The movement stayed in his nerves, a physical record of stress the sensors hadn't logged. Protocol said, trust the system. But protocol hadn't been written by a man who'd felt this bridge flex in a hurricane. He stood. A familiar ache bloomed in his right knee, the old injury from a fall on ice-clad catwalks 20 winters back. He ignored it. He stood. A familiar ache bloomed in his right knee, the old injury from a fall on ice-clad catwalks 20 winters back. He ignored it. He took his flashlight. He clipped his keys to his belt. He shrugged into his jacket. The steel door to the catwalk opened with a shriek. The night roared in, cold, immediate. He stepped out onto the metal grid, the river a moving darkness below. The catwalk was a ribcage of open grating bolted to the bridge's underside. Warren moved along it, his flashlight beam a narrow cone of white in the damp dark. The wind here had teeth plucking at his jacket, carrying the mineral smell of the river and the sharp scent of rust from aging steel. Below his boots, through the grid, he could see the churn of water, a distant, hypnotic violence. His knee complained with each step, a dull, hot pulse. He kept his weight centered, his pace even. He was headed for the South Tower, the fortress of steel that housed the primary lift mechanisms. The service door was set into the tower's base, a heavy steel plate with a lock that took one of the older brass keys on his ring. It turned with a solid clunk. The door swung inward. The gear room was a cathedral of shadows and monumental shapes. The air was cooler, thick with the smell of hot oil and ozone. The central gear, 20 feet across, sat dormant, its teeth gleaming dully in his flashlight beam. The walls were a nest of pipes, conduits, and junction boxes. Warren went straight to the vibration sensor array, mounted on a reinforced concrete pillar. The sensors were housed in a grey metal box. He shone his light on it. The seal was intact, but tucked behind the main conduit, nearly invisible, was a new line, a sleek black fiber optic cable. It was spliced into the main sensor feed with a small, professional-looking junction module. Sabotage. A deliberate, skilled bypass. He pulled a small digital camera from his jacket pocket, a relic he kept for documenting maintenance issues. He took 3 pictures: the overall setup, the splice, the module. The camera's flash was a brief, stark explosion in the cavernous space, freezing the giant gears in stark relief. As he lowered the camera, he heard voices. They were faint, muffled by the tower's thick walls and the ambient groan of the bridge. They came from below, from the riverside. He moved to a narrow access portal, a knee-high opening in the wall that led to an external maintenance ledge. He crouched, extinguishing his flashlight. The voices grew clearer, carried up from the ship's deck. "Just get it secured. We're on the clock." A gruffer reply. "He's still fighting. Needs another dose." "Fine. Do it quiet." Warren edged forward until he could see down. The coastal trader was directly below, its deck illuminated by dull orange work lights. The container stacks formed a canyon of corrugated steel. Near the stern, 3 figures were clustered. 2 men in dark, waterproof workwear, and a third in lighter-colored coveralls, sagging between them. Warren's breath stilled in his chest. The man in coveralls was Leo Mercer, 24, a junior bridge inspector. Warren had trained him on the manual lock overrides last winter. The younger man had a careful way with tools, a habit of double-checking his readings. He'd brought Warren a thermos of soup during a brutal January night shift. Now, Leo's head lolled. One of the dark-clad men pressed a cloth over his nose and mouth. Leo jerked, a muffled sound escaping, then went limp. Together, they hauled his dead weight toward an open-top storage container. This was how people vanished. Leo's boot caught on a deck cleat. His head jerked sideways, his face tilting up into the work light for a second. Pale, eyes glazed, a trickle of saliva at the corner of his mouth. Then he was heaved over the container's edge. A thud echoed up. The heavy steel door was slammed shut. A latch clanged into place. The 2 men stood for a moment, breathing heavily. One checked his watch. "Radio the captain. Tell him the package is secure. The bridge operator is quiet. We're green." The other nodded, speaking into a handheld radio. Their words were lost to the wind. Warren remained frozen in the dark portal. The cold steel of the ledge bit into his knees. The images burned behind his eyes, the professional splice in the sensor, Leo's slack face, the finality of that latched door. He backed silently into the gear room. His mind, a chamber of orderly processes, made the cold, hard connections. The sensor hack masked excessive weight. The ship was carrying something illegal and heavy. Leo must have discovered the hack during a routine inspection. He'd threatened to report it. They hadn't just corrupted a system, they were erasing the witness. Using his bridge on his last shift as the conveyor belt for a man's vanishing. He moved quickly now, the ache in his knee a sharp counter-rhythm to his pulse. He retreated back across the catwalk, the wind shoving at him. The control cabin felt alien when he re-entered, its warmth and light a lie. He went to the console. He called up the coastal trader's electronic manifest. Machine parts, ball bearings, non-hazardous materials. The shipping company, North Shore Logistics. A name he knew from old Port Authority bulletins about environmental fines and labor disputes. He opened the personnel file he wasn't supposed to access, a backdoor he'd created years ago for emergency coordination. He found Leo Mercer. His employee ID photo smiled out from the screen. His last logged activity was a sensor calibration check for the South Tower submitted at 1847 that evening, flagged, anomaly detected, recommend physical inspection. The report had been marked, reviewed, no action required, by a supervisor ID Warren didn't recognize 30 minutes later. They'd seen his report. They'd neutralized the reporter. Warren leaned back. The two paths ahead were not choices. They were cliffs. He could pick up the red emergency line, call the Coast Guard, the police, declare a hostage situation. The result would be a circus of sirens, SWAT teams, news helicopters. In the chaos, the men on that ship would have time to make Leo disappear for good. Warren's bridge would become a crime scene. His retirement would vanish into a vortex of statements and blame. He'd be the controller who let it happen. He could do nothing. Log the vibration as a glitch. At 0600, he would clock out. The coastal trader would sail. Leo Mercer would vanish. The bridge would fail months from now, its hidden flaw triggered, and the new automation would be blamed. Warren would be on his boat, the silence of the sea poisoned by what he'd traded for it. Both paths ended with Leo gone. Both paths ended his future, one in a blaze of public failure, the other in private ruin. He looked at the live feed from the security camera on the South Tower. It showed a slice of the coastal trader's deck, the sealed container a dark rectangle. A man stood guard beside it. No official path led out. Protocol was a trap. The system was compromised. His hands settled on the keyboard. The storm in his mind crystallized into a sequence of commands. He began to work. Act 3, the quiet rescue. Warren's plan lived in the silent pathways of the bridge's own design. His hands moved to the manual override panel. He used his master key. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Behind the panel, 3 industrial toggles waited. He threw the first. A deep, shuddering thump traveled up through the cabin frame. He threw the second. Another thump, followed by a long hydraulic sigh from the South Tower. The constant pressure in the cabin air dropped. He threw the third. The response was immediate. A series of sharp, percussive bangs echoed from below. The primary drive motors shrieked, then wound down into silence. The 60 Hz vibration that had been Warren's life for 42 years ceased. Then came the lock. A low, metallic grinding built to a shrieking protest of steel, culminating in a cataclysmic crunch-clunk that shook the glass in the cabin windows. The entire bridge structure lurched, then settled. On the screen, a schematic flashed, a solid red bar now slotted through the main trunnion. The 3-ton mechanical deadbolt was home. The Granite Point Bridge was now a barricade. The console lit up with crimson warnings. Manual interlock engaged. Critical system fault. A piercing siren wailed. Warren silenced it. The red lights continued to strobe. He turned to the lighting controls. On the touchscreen grid, he severed the main power trunks for the exterior illumination. Outside, the transformation was absolute. The great sodium vapor arcs that bathed the steel towers vanished. The guide lights along the catwalks blinked out. The bridge was swallowed by the night. Only the tiny red obstruction beacons on the tower peaks remained. He left the coastal trader's deck lights burning. They now shone in lonely pools on the ship's stern, illuminating the container and the 2 dark figures beside it. He keyed the marine band transmitter. His voice was a flat report. Coastal trader, Granite Point Control. We have a critical hydraulic interlock fault. Bridge movement is disabled. All traffic is halted. Estimate repair time, 20 minutes. Hold your position. Do not attempt to maneuver. Acknowledge. Silence. 10 seconds. Then the radio crackled. Granite Point, this is Coastal Trader. The captain's voice was a wire stretched tight. Unacceptable. We are on a hardened schedule. Nature of the fault? Primary load sensor cascade. Triggered a safety lock. Standard protocol. Hold position. I will advise. Another pause. Muffled argument in the background. Acknowledged. Holding. Our schedule is critical. I know, Warren thought. Phase 1 was complete. The ship was trapped. Now for the whisper. He switched to a submenu labeled Tower Horns. He donned a headset. His voice would be a ghost's coming from the sky. He toggled the system live. Leo, The word, projected from the tower speakers 60 feet above the deck, was metallic, distorted. He waited. The security camera feed showed no movement. Then, through his headset, a faint, rhythmic scratching. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 taps, a question mark, then 3 more. S. He was there, listening. South Tower, Warren whispered. Starboard side, near your stern. Fixed ladder on the hull. The access hatch above is unlocked. Wait for my signal. He split his screen. Left, the zoomed camera feed. One guard paced, the other leaned against the container. Right, a digital schematic of the ship's deck. Now, Warren breathed. The pacing guard is turning. The other is not looking. Go, quiet, up the ladder. On the screen, nothing changed. Then the latch door of the container eased open. A figure in pale coveralls slipped out, pressing into the shadow of the container stack. Leo. He moved along the rail, found the iron ladder, and began to climb. The leaning guard shifted, uncrossing his arms. His head turned slightly toward the stern. Warren's finger moved. He commanded the high-intensity work lights on the bridge's western abutment to ignite. They flashed with a loud pop and a searing white burst before dying. The guard's head snapped up, staring at the distant bridge. Leo froze on the ladder, 15 feet above the deck. Move, Warren urged, his whisper tense. He's looking the wrong way. Climb. Leo climbed. The rungs were slick. His boot slipped on the 28th rung. The rubber sole scraped against wet iron with a sharp scree. The guard on deck spun. Hey! Warren didn't hesitate. He called up the bridge's counterweight ballast controls. He commanded an emergency transfer. The bridge groaned. The sound was deep, organic. The entire structure listed to starboard with a sudden, sickening lurch of several inches. On the ship below, the deck tilted sharply. The guard stumbled, crashing into the container. "What the hell?" he yelled. His partner staggered, grabbing a railing. On the ladder, Leo abandoned stealth. He hauled himself up the last 15 feet in a frantic scramble. His hands slapped the catwalk grating. He hauled himself over the railing and collapsed. Inside, the service door, now. Leo pushed up, stumbled to the steel door in the tower base, and wrenched it open. He vanished inside. Warren cut the tower horns. The silent rescue was over. On the camera feed, the 2 guards were on their feet, shining flashlights up at the catwalk. The beams swept across empty grating. "He's gone! The tower! He went in the tower!" One guard was already on his radio, yelling. They knew. The clock was pounding now. Warren switched to the internal camera in the south gear room. Leo stood in the center, bent over, hands on his knees, sucking in ragged gulps of air. His face was streaked with grime and blood. Warren keyed the internal comms. "Leo, look at the camera in the northeast corner." The young man's head jerked up. His eyes found the lens. "Behind the primary gear, service elevator, code is 7139. Go, now." Leo didn't nod. He turned and ran, his boots echoing on the concrete, disappearing into the gloom. Warren turned his attention back to the ship. The 2 guards were at the base of the tower now. One slammed a pry bar into the seam of the service door. The sharp clang of steel on steel rang out. They were coming. The sound was a battering ram. Warren's focus didn't waver. He watched the service elevator indicator on the wall panel. It blinked from B to 1. A soft ding echoed in the corridor outside the cabin. The door slid open. Leo Mercer stumbled out. He was pale, one arm wrapped around his ribs, breathing in sharp, shallow gasps. Warren unlocked the cabin's interior door. "In here." Leo staggered inside and leaned heavily against the rear console, his eyes wide, tracking the flashing red alarms. "There, at the tower door." "Sit down," Warren said. His voice was flat, an anchor in the chaos. He grabbed a water bottle from the small fridge and tossed it to him. "Drink, watch this." He pointed to the monitor showing the external tower feed. The 2 guards were at the service door. The broad man had the pry bar wedged deep. He braced his feet and heaved. The door groaned, a high-pitched shriek of stressed metal. Warren moved to the environmental panel. On the schematic, he found the system for the South Tower's lower gear rooms, a fire suppression deluge. It would flood the space with a vaporized, non-toxic chemical foam, a blunt, messy tool for a blunt problem. He flipped up the clear plastic guard. Under it was a single, red button. Tower B, Foam Deluge. He pressed it. A deep, resonant whoop-whoop alarm sounded twice from speakers within the tower itself. On the monitor, both men froze, looking up. From vents and nozzles inside the enclosed lower tower, a thick white cloud of suppressant foam erupted. An eruption, filling the space with silent, rapid expansion. It billowed out the service door, engulfing the two men in a blinding, churning cascade. The pry bar clattered to the ground and disappeared into the suds. The men vanished into the foam, their shapes dissolving into frantic, flailing shadows. They were alive, not seriously hurt, but they were neutralized, blinded, choking and trapped in a clinging, sightless mess. The immediate threat was contained, but the ship was still there. The crime was still in progress. Warren turned back to the main console. The clock read 05:42. He had 18 minutes until his shift ended, until automation took over and the record of this night was sealed into an official, reviewable log. He had one final move, not to hide, but to expose, to send the truth to an authority the men in the foam couldn't buy. He moved to the secondary comms terminal, an older machine with a heavy keyboard. This was the legacy system. He bypassed the modern network entirely, accessing a dedicated hardwired line, a direct encrypted teletype to the US Coast Guard cutter Marquis stationed 12 miles downriver. The screen glowed with green text on black. Secure Line 1, active, recipient USCGC Marquis. His fingers began to type. His fingers typed with spare, factual precision. Priority, Alpha, Granite Point, Bridge Control. Incident, unauthorized vessel, suspected hostile action. Vessel, Coastal Trader, position, moored South Tower. Evidence of 1, sabotage of bridge load sensors. 2, illegal transport of hazmat. 3, kidnapping of bridge personnel, Leo Mercer, ID number 4479, hostiles on deck, armed with tools, attempting forced entry to bridge infrastructure. Request, immediate armed intercept and boarding. All bridge systems locked down. Control, cabin secure. He attached the digital files, the photo of the spliced sensor, the time-stamped log showing Leo's flagged report and its suppression, the security still of the men forcing the hooded figure into the container. He then set the transmission to repeat every 60 seconds and locked the terminal. The message was now a heartbeat, pulsing down the secure line to the cutter. There was no recall. The clock read 05:45. Leo sat on the floor by the rear console, sipping water, his breathing slower, but his hands still trembling. He watched Warren, a silent question in his eyes. "They're coming," Warren said, not looking away from the main console. He began methodically closing his personal interfaces, clearing his command history. He left the official logs intact, and the transmitted alert queued and repeating. The record would show a controller following safety protocols, detecting an anomaly, and escalating to the proper federal authority. It would not show the silent rescue, the tower horns, the calculated lurch. It would show a man doing his job. At 05:53, a new sound cut through the low hum of the cabin electronics. The powerful, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of marine diesel engines growing louder from downriver. Warren went to the window. The USCGC Marquis was a blade of white slicing through the dark water, its navigation lights sharp. A blue strobe flashed atop its wheelhouse. It moved with purpose, closing the distance fast. Its spotlight, a blinding column of white, lanced out, sweeping the river before pinning the Coastal Trader in its glare. The ship looked small and dirty in the pure official light. A voice, amplified and metallic, boomed across the water, silencing the night. "Coastal trader, this is the United States Coast Guard. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. All personnel on deck, show your hands now." On the monitor, the two guards were still struggling at the base of the foam-filled tower, coated in white, waving weakly. They froze at the sound, turning their smeared faces toward the blinding light. It was over. Warren turned to Leo. "When they come, tell them everything. Show them the evidence on Terminal 2. It's all there." "What are you going to do?" Leo's voice was raw. "My shift ends at 6. At 05:58, the first Coast Guard rigid-hull inflatable boat bumped against the bridge's lower maintenance dock. Warren heard the thud of boots on metal, the brisk calls of a team moving with controlled urgency. The sounds ascended through the structure. At 0600 exactly, the automated handover sequence on the main console initiated. A soft, two-toned chime sounded. The screens flickered, and control officially passed to the remote traffic center. The bridge no longer needed him. The cabin door opened. A Coast Guard lieutenant stepped in, followed by an armed petty officer. She was in her 30s, her face all business, her eyes taking in the scene. The older man at the console, the younger one on the floor, the strobe of red fault lights. "Warren Hale?" "Yes, Lieutenant." "I'm Lieutenant Vance, USCG-C Marquis. We have the coastal trader secured. 4 individuals in custody, 2 on the ship, 2 at the tower base. We found the sensor bypass and the container. Your evidence transmission was received." Her eyes went to Leo. "You're Leo Mercer?" Leo nodded, pushing himself up. "Yes, Mum." "Are you injured?" "I'm okay." She looked back at Warren. "You locked the bridge down? Activated the structural interlock?" "Standard safety protocol for a critical, unexplained fault," Warren said, his voice devoid of inflection. "To prevent a possible catastrophic failure during a vessel passage. And the foam system in the tower. Signs of forced entry. Activated the fire suppression protocol as a deterrent. Standard procedure for securing infrastructure." She held his gaze for a moment, as if looking for something more. Fear, pride, a crack in the stoic facade. She saw only the weary competence of a man who had run his machine for the last time. She gave a single slow nod. "We'll need a full statement from Mr. Mercer, and a debrief from you, Mr. Hale. Can you come to the station tomorrow?" "I can. We know where to find you." "Thank you, Lieutenant." She turned to Leo. "Come with me, son. Let's get you checked out and get your statement." Leo looked at Warren. He didn't speak, but his eyes held a gratitude too large for words. Warren gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Leo followed the lieutenant out. Warren was alone in the cabin. The red warning light still pulsed, reflecting off the glass. He took his jacket from the hook, the canvas worn soft at the elbows. He slipped it on. He walked out of the control cabin for the last time, down the interior stairs, and out into the cool, pre-dawn air in the bridge's main anchorage lot. His truck was the only vehicle there. The sky had lightened from black to a deep velvet blue in the east. He drove south along the coastal road as the world warmed into color. He did not turn on the radio. The silence was his. South Haven Marina was quiet, the water a sheet of pale glass reflecting the first peach streaks of sunrise. Slip 14. The dawn treader sat waiting, her lines taut, her forest green hull dark and solid. He stepped aboard. The deck was firm and sure under his feet. He stored his bag below, went through the pre-start checklist by touch, and turned the ignition. The trawler's single diesel engine rumbled to life, a familiar, solid vibration that seemed to push the last of the night's tension out through the hull. He cast off the lines, pushed away from the dock, and turned the bow toward the open channel. As he motored slowly past the mouth of the river, he could see it, miles away now. The Granite Point Bridge, a tiny grey silhouette against the vast burning orange of the sunrise. Silent. Still. Held. He pushed the throttle forward, and the boat carved a clean white wake into the deepening blue. Ahead, there was only water and sky.